He hunted the homeless, the serial killer no one saw coming. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. It was a cold, wet morning. The kind that seeps into your bones. The kind that makes the streets feel emptier than they already are. Downtown was barely waking up. Shops still locked. Buses still half empty. The only sounds were the hiss of car tires on wet pavement and the distant hum of a garbage truck. Then came the scream. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. But it was sharp, like something breaking. A woman in a tattered coat stood frozen near an alley, her breath visible in the air. Her hands trembled as she pointed toward the shadows. 2 patrol officers were nearby. They heard her. They rushed over. One of them, Officer Ramirez, drew his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. That's when they saw him. A man, middle-aged, face pale, clothes soaked from the rain. He lay sprawled between 2 overflowing dumpsters, his body twisted in a way that didn't look natural. Officer Ramirez stepped closer. The man's eyes were open, blank. His lips were bluish. No movement. The other officer, Davis, knelt down. 2 seconds later, he shook his head. No pulse. The woman who found him backed away. Her voice cracked. I know him. He's one of the guys who sleeps out here. His name's Carl. I saw him last night. He was fine. But Carl wasn't fine now. And the way his body looked, it didn't seem like a natural death. The alley felt wrong. It was quiet, but not peaceful. The officers noticed it immediately. Even the usual city sounds seemed muted. Ramirez scanned the ground. Something caught his eye. A small trail of dark, wet spots leading deeper into the alley. They weren't from the rain. Blood. The droplets ended near Carl's right boot. And on his neck was a thin, deep cut. Davis swore under his breath. This isn't just some guy freezing to death. Someone did this. By now, a small crowd of early morning pedestrians had gathered at the mouth of the alley. Most just stared. Some whispered. A homeless man in a threadbare hoodie shook his head slowly. Not the first time, he muttered. Ramirez caught that. What do you mean? The man looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. 2 nights ago, another one. Over on 4th Street. They said it was an overdose. But I don't buy it. When Detective Marissa Kane got the call, she was halfway through her first cup of coffee. By the time she reached the scene, the rain had turned into a fine mist. She ducked under the yellow tape and looked at the body. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes were sharp, scanning every detail. She'd been on the force for 12 years. Seen overdoses. Seen stabbings. Seen what cold weather could do to a man. This wasn't any of those. Position of the body? She asked Davis. Was like this when we found him. No wallet. No ID. Except his name from a witness. Kane nodded. She crouched down, careful not to touch the body. Her gaze fixed on the neck wound. It was clean. Precise. Not the kind of slash you'd see in a chaotic street fight. She stood up. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. As the coroner's team arrived, Kane took statements. The homeless witnesses were hesitant at first. Years of distrust made them wary. But the more she asked, the more details trickled out. Carl had been around for years. Quiet, kept to himself, didn't bother anyone. No one saw him get attacked. But several said they'd noticed a man hanging around late at night. Not one of them. Clean clothes, expensive jacket, watching. One man said he thought he saw the stranger following Carl 2 nights ago. He didn't think much of it at the time. Kane scribbled notes. She'd heard stories like this before. Predators targeting the vulnerable. People who lived on the edges of society. People whose deaths didn't make headlines. And that made her uneasy. By afternoon, the medical examiner's preliminary report came in. Carl had died from massive blood loss. The wound on his neck had severed the carotid artery. Death would have been quick. Silent. Kane pulled up the file for the death on 4th Street. Official cause, heroin overdose. But the report mentioned a small cut on the victim's neck. It had been dismissed as accidental. Now, it didn't look so accidental. She mapped both locations. only 6 blocks apart. Both victims homeless men in their 50s. Both last seen alive after dark. It was enough to make her think she had a serial predator on her hands. That night, Kane went back to the scene. The rain had stopped. The city glistened under streetlights. She stood in the same alley where Carl had been found. The dumpsters still smelled of rot. The shadows still clung to the corners. She imagined the killer here, waiting, watching, stepping out when the moment was right. She didn't know yet that the man she was looking for had already killed more than once. She didn't know that his victims were chosen carefully. She didn't know that he blended in so well. He could walk past her on the street and she wouldn't think twice. But she would. Soon, somewhere across town, the killer sat in his car. He was calm. He had a thermos of coffee. The radio played softly. He thought about Carl. About the way the man had barely fought back. About how quickly the life had drained from his eyes. It wasn't about rage. It wasn't about money. It was about control. The thrill of deciding who lived and who didn't. And tonight, he was already thinking about his next target. The call came just after 4 a.m. Detective Marissa Kane was still awake. She'd been staring at her case board, trying to connect dots that didn't want to be connected. The dispatcher's voice was flat. Another one. Same area. Kane grabbed her coat. Her gut tightened. It was happening again. By the time she arrived, the street lamps cast long shadows across the empty park. The benches were wet from dew, and on one of them lay a man. He looked asleep at first glance. Arms folded over his chest. Head tilted to the side. But the stillness told the truth. A thin red line traced across his throat. Blood had soaked into the wood beneath him. Officer Ramirez met her halfway. "This one's different," he said quietly. No signs of a struggle. It's like he just sat down and let it happen. Kane's eyes narrowed. The precision of the cut was the same. The lack of mess was the same. But the location was public. Boulder. An older woman in a scarf stood nearby. Her hands were wrapped tight around a paper cup of coffee. "I saw him," she said softly. Her voice shook, but not from the cold. Kane leaned in. "When?" "Maybe an hour ago. I was walking home from my shift. He was here, alive, talking to someone. A man in a dark coat. They weren't yelling, just talking. And then I heard footsteps behind me. When I looked back, the man was gone." Kane asked for a description. She didn't get much. Tall, dark hair, wore gloves. But that was more than she had before. Back at the station, Kane pinned a third photo on the board. 3 men, 3 cuts to the neck, 3 nights apart. She marked the locations on a map. The shape they formed wasn't random. It was a triangle. The killer was circling the same area. Hunting ground. The problem? There were hundreds of homeless people in that radius. Any one of them could be next. Kane decided to go back out. Not as a detective. Not flashing a badge. Just walking the streets. Talking to people who lived there. Under a bridge, she found a group huddled around a fire in a barrel. They were cautious at first. But one man, who went by Spider, finally spoke up. "Yeah, we've seen him. Drives a black sedan. Parks a few blocks away. Doesn't talk to nobody except the ones he's after. We figure he picks them out first. Watches them." "How do you know it's the same guy?" Kane asked. Spider leaned forward. "Because we saw his eyes once. Cold. Like nothing inside." That night, Kane didn't know she was being watched. From across the street, a man leaned on a lamppost, half hidden in shadow. He recognized her from the alley. The detective. He smiled faintly. The game was getting interesting. In a small apartment on the edge of town, the killer had his own board. Not with photos, with scraps of paper. Each one had a name, a date, place. He picked them carefully. Never 2 from the same block. Never 2 who knew each other well. And after each kill, he took something small. A button, a shoelace, a coin. It wasn't about trophies. It was about memory, control. 2 days later, Kane got another tip. A man matching the suspect's vague description had been seen near a shelter on 9th Street. She went there herself. The shelter smelled of disinfectant and damp clothes. A volunteer told her a tall man had been hanging around outside, offering cigarettes to people coming in. When asked who he was, he said he was just passing through. Kane left her number and warned them to be careful. Her instincts told her he'd be back. And she was right. That night, a man named Joel, new to the shelter, stepped outside for air. He didn't notice the figure standing near the alley entrance. Not until he spoke. "Cold night, isn't it?" Joel nodded. The man stepped closer. Gloves on. No visible weapon. Joel felt a sudden, sharp pain in his neck. He reached up, confused, but his strength was already fading. The world tilted, went black. A car's headlights swept the alley. The killer froze. A delivery truck slowed as it passed. Too risky. He let Joel slump against the wall. Blood trickled, but the cut wasn't deep enough to kill this time. The killer vanished into the night. Joel lived. When Kane arrived, Joel was being loaded into an ambulance. He was pale but conscious. She knelt beside the stretcher. "Do you know who did this?" Joel's voice was weak. Tall, dark coat, gloves. I think he smiled before he cut me." That was enough for Kane to know two things. The killer was escalating. And now he knew she was getting closer. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The rain didn't stop all night. Thin sheets of water ran along the curbs, reflecting neon from the corner liquor store. Detective Kane sat in her unmarked car, engine off, watching the entrance to the 9th Street shelter. She'd been there for 5 hours. Her coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. She wasn't leaving until he showed up. Joel had been moved to a safe location, but his words stuck with her. The way he smiled, it was like he was enjoying a joke only he knew. Kane had heard descriptions of sadists before, but this was different. This killer wasn't just acting on impulse. He was calculating, and the survivors were never supposed to exist. That mistake, letting Joel live, would make him slip again. She was counting on it. At 1:14 a.m., movement caught her eye. A tall figure stepped from the shadows at the far end of the block. Long coat, hat low, gloves. He didn't walk directly to the shelter. Instead, he lingered by the payphone on the corner, pretending to dial. Then, slowly, he drifted toward the alley. Kane's pulse kicked up. She touched the radio. "Unit 4, this is Kane. Possible target approaching the shelter entrance. Move into position but hold until I give the word." Earlier that day, Kane had made a risky move. She'd arranged for an undercover officer, dressed to blend in with the shelter crowd, to wait outside. He would play the role of a vulnerable loner, sitting on the steps smoking. The killer didn't know it, but he was walking into bait. From her car, Kane saw him notice the homeless man on the steps. He slowed, tilted his head, then approached. But before Kane could give the takedown signal, another figure emerged from the alley behind the shelter. A real homeless man, skinny, wearing an oversized hoodie, walked straight into the scene. The killer shifted instantly. He ignored the decoy, focused on the new man instead. Kane swore under her breath. The trap was slipping away. The killer followed the man into the alley. Kane jumped from her car and ran, signaling the backup unit. Her boots splashed through puddles. By the time she rounded the corner, she caught just a glimpse of them. The killer's hand on the man's shoulder, the glint of steel in the other hand. "Police! Drop it!" Kane's voice cracked through the rain. He didn't drop it. He shoved the man to the ground and bolted deeper into the maze of alleys. Kane ran after him. Her radio squawked as other units closed in from different directions. He was fast, knew the back streets. He vaulted a fence like he'd done it 100 times before. Kane climbed after him, her hands slick on the wet metal. She cornered him behind an abandoned laundromat. Steam rose from a vent nearby, obscuring the space in a shifting haze. He turned slowly. She finally saw his face, just enough to know he wasn't a stranger to violence. Sharp features, dead eyes. "On your knees," she ordered. He smiled, the same smile Joel had described. Then he lunged. Kane blocked the first swing of the knife. It sliced her coat, missing skin by an inch. She drove her shoulder into him, trying to knock him down, but he was stronger than she expected. They crashed against the wall. The knife scraped brick inches from her face. A siren wailed closer. The killer heard it too. He twisted free, shoving her hard enough to send her sprawling. By the time she scrambled up, he was gone into the darkness. But he had dropped something. In the puddle where he'd stood lay a single black glove. Kane picked it up carefully, slipping it into an evidence bag. It was leather, worn, but inside, fibers, and a small smear of blood that wasn't hers. The next morning, the glove sat under bright forensic lights. The tech, Murphy, was practically humming with excitement. "Got two things," he said. "First, trace fibers consistent with upholstery from a late-model black sedan. Second, DNA on the blood smear. Male. Not in Cody's." Kane's stomach sank. No match meant no name. But the car was something. She sent out a quiet request to traffic cams within the killer's hunting zone. Black sedans. Late model. Registered in the area. By the afternoon, she had a list of 7 possible owners. She circled one name in red. A man with no fixed employment, no social media, no obvious family, and an apartment just 2 blocks from where the first body was found. That night, Kane set up surveillance on his building. She didn't knock. Not yet. She wanted to see his habits. At 2:03 a.m., the black sedan pulled into the alley behind the building. He got out carrying a small duffel bag. Instead of going inside, he walked to the dumpster and threw the bag in. It was risky, but she couldn't wait. As soon as he was gone, she and Ramirez opened the bag. Inside, a knife, 3 loose buttons, a shoelace tied in a knot, and a coin with dried blood on the edge. Trophies. She was holding the proof she needed. But there was one more thing. A folded piece of paper with a name on it. And a date. Tomorrow's date. The name was Earl. Spider had mentioned him once. A quiet man who slept near the river under the old freight bridge. If they didn't move fast, Earl would be next. Kane knew she could arrest the killer now. The evidence was enough to put him away for a long time. But if she waited just one more night, they could catch him in the act. On video, no chance for a defense attorney to claim circumstantial evidence. It was dangerous, but so was letting him walk free another day. She made the call. The trap was set. This time it would hold. The rain was gone. The air was sharp, cold enough to sting the lungs. Downtown was nearly silent, except for the occasional rumble of a passing freight train. Detective Kane stood near the freight bridge. She was dressed in plain clothes, hood pulled up. Her breath drifted in thin clouds. This was it. Tonight he would come for Earl. 3 unmarked cars were stationed at different angles. 2 uniformed officers posed as drunks, leaning against a light pole across the street. Another officer sat on the riverbank, pretending to fish even though the water was black and frozen. Kane kept her eyes on the underpass where Earl usually slept. She didn't see him yet. Her gut twisted. If he'd moved on, the plan would fall apart. At 11:46 p.m., a familiar shape appeared from the shadows. Tall, thin, carrying a plastic bag filled with cans. Earl shuffled to his spot under the bridge and sat down, his back against the graffiti-covered concrete. He pulled a blanket over his shoulders. Kane exhaled slowly. The bait was in place. Hours crawled by. The killer's habits were predictable. He struck between 1 and 3 a.m. By then, the streets were empty, and his footsteps could disappear into the hum of the city. But tonight, the city wasn't sleeping. It was watching. Kane gripped her earpiece. All units, eyes sharp. He's not walking out of here. At 1:17 a.m., Kane's pulse spiked. A black sedan rolled slowly down the block. It didn't stop. It circled once, twice, like a shark sizing up prey. Then it pulled into the alley, headlights cutting out instantly. Kane could barely make out the driver's silhouette. Hat low, gloves. He got out, moving with quiet confidence. Not rushed, not cautious, like a man who had done this too many times. He walked toward the bridge, staying close to the walls. a shadow among shadows. Unit 2, hold position, Kane whispered into the mic. She wanted him in the kill zone, where every angle was covered before they moved. The killer stopped a few feet from Earl. He said something Kane couldn't hear. Earl looked up, confused. Then the man reached into his coat. Kane saw the glint of steel. "Move!" she barked. Four officers surged forward from different directions. "Police! Drop it!" The killer froze for half a second, then bolted toward the riverbank. Kane sprinted after him. He weaved through the concrete pillars, using the dark like a shield. Ramirez cut him off from the left. Two more officers blocked the bridge exit. He was trapped, but he didn't surrender. He turned the knife on Kane, slashing in tight, fast arcs. She blocked the first strike with her forearm, pain shooting up her arm. Ramirez lunged from behind, trying to grab his shoulders. The killer twisted, elbowing Ramirez in the jaw. Then he broke free, heading straight for the river. The bank was steep and slick with mud. He lost his footing halfway down, tumbling into the shallow water. Kane and two officers followed. They cornered him against the steel wall of the flood barrier. "Drop the knife!" Kane shouted, gun raised. For a moment, he looked like he might fight to the death. Then something in his expression shifted. Not fear, not regret, but amusement. He let the knife fall. They cuffed him in the icy water. His coat was heavy with mud, dripping black rivulets. Kane leaned in close. "Name." He smiled. "Names don't matter." Back in the interrogation room, he sat with perfect posture. Hands on the table. Eyes steady. Kane read the list of items found in his car. 2 more knives. A rope. A folded map with certain alleyways circled in red ink. "You were hunting them," Kane said. He didn't deny it. "Waste," he muttered, taking up space. "I was just cleaning up." His fingerprints revealed his identity. Thomas Riker, 43, a transient himself years ago, arrested twice for assault, both charges dropped. But then came the cold cases. 4 unsolved murders of homeless men in 3 different cities. All with the same pattern. All in places Riker had been. Kane showed him Joel's photo. This man lived. Riker's jaw twitched. "That was a mistake," he said. "Won't happen again." Kane leaned forward. "It just did." Earl was still shaken but alive. "They told me not to move," he said, his voice trembling. "I saw him. I swear I've seen him before. Months ago. He was watching me, but he never came close. Guess he was waiting." Before dawn, as Kane was leaving the station, her phone buzzed. It was Murphy from forensics. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "That blood we pulled from his glove is not just from one person. We've got 3 separate profiles, all from unsolved cases." Kane stopped cold in the hallway. 3, which meant there could be more. Much more. Riker sat in a cell, but Kane knew his arrest was just the start. Somewhere out there were bodies they hadn't found. Families who didn't know what happened to their loved ones. And Kane couldn't shake the look on his face when they cuffed him. Not fear, not defeat, just the calm of a man who believed the game wasn't over. The storm had passed, but inside the precinct, the air was heavier than ever. Detective Kane sat in the interrogation observation room, staring at Thomas Riker through the glass. He was motionless, like a statue carved from stone. 3 blood profiles on his gloves. At least 4 murders in other states linked to him. And Kane knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. Riker hadn't said a word since the first interview. Not to Kane. Not to his public defender. He just sat, hands folded, eyes fixed on a single point on the wall. "Guy thinks he's untouchable," Murphy muttered beside her. "No," Kane said. "He thinks he's still in control." At 2:14 a.m., forensics came back with something big. The rope found in Riker's car contained human skin cells. The DNA matched an unsolved case from 2018. A homeless veteran named Carl Peterson, found strangled behind an abandoned warehouse. But there was more. The warehouse location matched one of the red circles on Riker's folded map. The pattern was emerging. Kane spread the map out on the table. Each red circle was near shelters, soup kitchens, riverbank encampments, places where the vulnerable gathered. But one circle caught her eye. It wasn't near the city at all. It was deep in the woods, 40 miles away. At dawn, Cain, Ramirez, and 2 deputies drove out. The road was narrow, cracked, and swallowed by trees. Mist clung to the ground, wrapping around their boots. Following the map's coordinates, they reached a clearing. The air smelled of wet soil and decay. Then Ramirez called out, "Over here!" They dug just beneath the roots of an old oak. The dirt was loose, too loose for this deep in the forest. And then, the shovel struck something solid. They brushed the soil away and found a tarp. Inside was a body, or what was left of one, male, clothing tattered, hands bound with rope identical to Riker's. They kept digging, and the second tarp appeared, then a third. By nightfall, they had unearthed 6 bodies, all bound, all dumped in the same shallow, careless graves. Cain's stomach turned. This was a killing field. Back at the station, Cain confronted Riker with photos of the graves. His eyes flickered just for a fraction of a second. "You left them there to rot," Cain said. Riker's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "They were already forgotten," he replied. Over the next hour, Riker began to talk. Not about remorse, not about names, but about his mission. "They're in every city," he said. "You walk past them every day. You don't look them in the eyes. I did, and I did what no one else would." Cain's hand tightened around her pen. "You mean you hunted them?" He nodded slowly. "Like animals." When Cain pressed him on the map, Riker said something that froze her in place. "That's not my map. That's ours." Cain leaned forward. "Ours?" He smiled. "There are others. You'll never find them all." FBI agents swarmed in within hours. The possibility of multiple killers working in different cities turned the case into a nationwide manhunt. Cain reviewed the evidence again and again. Every circle on the map was now a potential grave site. But there was one problem. Some circles had already been crossed out in pencil. In Riker's phone, they found a hidden folder. Inside were grainy night vision clips, figures sleeping in alleys, figures walking alone at night. In some, a second person could be seen in the distance. But it wasn't Riker. Whoever was holding the camera wasn't him. Cain decided to speak to Riker one last time before the feds took him. She walked into the interrogation room. "You're going away forever," she said. "You won't see the outside again." He chuckled. "You think that matters? You cut the head off a snake. The body still moves." Cain leaned in. "You're not a snake. You're just a coward with a knife." For the first time, his smile faltered, just slightly. 2 days later, Riker was loaded into a transport van bound for a federal holding facility. The streets were wet, the sky overcast. Halfway there, the van passed a small underpass. A lone figure stood in the shadows, watching, face obscured, still as stone. Ramirez noticed. "Think that's one of his others?" he asked. Cain didn't answer. Her stomach told her the truth. Back at her desk, Cain stared at the red circles still unvisited. She knew the FBI would take over. She knew she should walk away, but she couldn't. Because Riker was right about one thing. They would never find them all. And somewhere out there, someone else was already choosing their next target. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.